And joining us now from Brussels is Ukraine's ambassador to NATO, Ihor Dolov. Ambassador Dolov, thanks for joining us. We are getting reports that Russian tanks, artillery and troops are inside Ukraine fighting on the side of the rebels. The question is this, in the view of Ukraine, a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia?
Yes, of course, and that is why today NATO-Ukraine Commission had an urgent meeting, which was convoked on request of Ukrainian side yesterday when we discovered that Russian troops invaded Ukraine and penetrated into the territory of Ukraine. It's the next round of escalation which requires immediate reaction from the international community and, of course, NATO being preoccupied with security issues, and we are a distinctive partner of NATO, had to react. So today we discussed this new development in my country.
The Kremlin is denying that Russian troops are involved in the fighting inside Ukraine, and it's now calling upon the anti-government forces, the rebels inside eastern Ukraine, to create some kind of a humanitarian corridor so that Ukrainian troops, which have been surrounded by rebel forces, will be allowed to leave.
Well, battles are going on in different places and in different locations. So it might be that in different villages, the position of Ukrainian forces is different. But let me just draw your attention to the fact that this new development was caused primarily because of the success of Ukrainian anti-terrorist operation, and Russian forces decided to invade Ukraine to distract Ukrainian forces from theaters near Donetsk and Luhansk, creating thus a new center of instability and escalation.
Ambassador, I want you to take a listen to what the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Vitaly Cherkin, said about the crisis. Let's watch this.
The current escalation in the southeast of Ukraine is a direct consequence of the reckless policy of Kiev, which is directing war against its own people.
So there you heard the ambassador. That is the Russian ambassador to the UN, blaming this on the Ukrainian government. What is your response to that?
You know, it's difficult to comment statements of Russian representatives, because every time we face that Russians deny everything, visible facts and clear positions. What we cannot understand, accept and tolerate, that neighboring country intervene into internal affairs not only by declarations but by military force. Is it the way to solve any outstanding problems? Is it the way we have to act in the 21st century? We cannot accept this way. Ukraine is ready for peaceful solutions, but it's difficult to look for such an option if foreign troops are deployed on your territory.
So you say Ukraine wants peaceful solutions. Take us through what you'd like to happen. Take us through what you see as the diplomatic way out of this.
Well, just let me remind you that only a few days ago, President Poroshenko had a long discussion with President Putin. And it was a clear gesture from Ukrainian side that we are ready to negotiate and we are ready to look for the solution. And what happened next? Next, Russian troops crossed the border and invaded Ukraine. So it's difficult to negotiate in such a condition. And the trick is that the most important thing in all this situation is to close the border. And we repeatedly called on Russian side to close the border from their side, to stop supplies of armed people, of military equipment and financial resources to those terrorist groups acting on the territory of Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
But in the meantime, you know, the rhetoric is getting more heated on both sides. President Putin in Moscow has said that he sees the Russian people and the Ukrainian people as one people. But at the same time, he also compared Ukraine and its government to the Nazis. Let's take a listen to what he said.
It reminds me of the events of World War II, when Nazi German occupiers, fascist German troops, laid siege to our cities. For instance, Leningrad. So they laid siege to our cities, to Leningrad, and were directly shelling cities, killing their residents.
President Putin there comparing the Ukrainian government to Nazis.
Well, it's a pity that the leader of the neighboring big country made a statement like that. It's not the right way, and history do not tolerate such an attitude. What we see now in Ukraine, that under artificial pretexts, Russia more and more deeply is being involved into Ukrainian internal affairs. And protection of Russian-speaking population is not a good reason. And we live in a different state. And it's very difficult for Russian leadership to accept the fact that Ukraine is an independent state and will continue to act independently. And it's up to Ukrainian people to decide their own future. We need no foreign assistance from Moscow. We need no Russian troops on our territory.
Is Ukraine going to seek membership of NATO, and will that not be seen by Moscow as some kind of provocation?
Well, the question is simple. We have two things. First thing is the declaration and decision of the NATO Bucharest summit that Georgia and Ukraine will be NATO member states. The second thing is that according to the current Ukrainian legislation, especially we have a law on foundations of internal and foreign policy, Ukraine is a non-bloc state. So to continue to apply for NATO membership, we need to change the legislation. How to do so? First thing that we need, it's a strong support of population. And now we see growing public support for NATO every day. Now more than 50% of Ukrainians are in favor of NATO membership. So next steps are laying in the field of legislation and decisions of the parliament and the goodwill or will of Ukrainian people and decision of Ukrainian president.
There is a high-level meeting that's going to be taking place in Brussels. That's a meeting of European Union leaders. President Poroshenko will be at that meeting. What will he be telling those leaders? What will he be expecting to hear from those leaders?
It is clear that EU, as well as NATO, as well as global players, are not ready to accept what have been done by the Russian Federation. Nobody is ready to tolerate aggression and invasion of the independent and sovereign state. What is on the agenda? It's more sanctions, more restrictions.
One final question I have for you, and that concerns the United Nations report, which has just been released, accusing Ukraine of human rights atrocities in eastern Ukraine. That report actually blames both sides, blames the rebels as well for human rights atrocities, but it says that the Ukrainian government troops have been involved in illegal detention, torture, and enforced disappearances. These are very serious accusations.
Well, the only thing that I want to say, responding to your question, that it's Ukraine and Ukrainian government who invited observers from the OSCE. It's again Ukrainian government who invited to deploy humanitarian mission from United Nations. We are open. Please come and observe and fix all facts. And it is not Ukrainian side who started the violence. It is not the actions of Ukrainian government who created such a situation. We know who is responsible for that, and it is not a secret for everybody. And the problem is that being more and more isolated, Russia continues the same way. They continue their policy of supporting terrorism and destabilizing my country. Mostly what is going on, that separatists and terrorist groups supported by Moscow just make a daily life of civil population who didn't live affected area more and more difficult. And unfortunately, every day we count more and more casualties among military personnel of Ukrainian armed forces and, unfortunately, among civilians. This is the result of aggression from the Russian side, and this is the result of support of separatists from that side of the border.
Ambassador Ihor Dolohov of Ukraine, thanks for joining us, sir.